Hi, we're back again, and we're going to page 80 today, and we're going to be starting on chapter 9, prophecies conferred on learners and adepts. But I wanted to read something from the dictionary very quickly because it came up from a very good friend of mine, somebody I respect very much, mentioning to me pronunciations of Sanskrit. And I just wanted to explain, because anybody that's been listening to all my videos has heard me start to say the Sanskrit names a little bit differently than I did originally. Okay, so the best example of this changeover for me and the way I say things comes from the definition of the four great voice hearers: Meheke Shayapa, Sabuti, Malgayayana, and Katyayana, whose attainment of Buddhahood is predicted in the bestowal of prophecy, 6th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. That's what I mentioned previously. These four belong to a group of intermediate capacity amongst Shakyamuni's voice hearer disciples. They constitute the second of the three groups of voice hearer disciples. So they're like separated. They're one click below Shariputra. They constitute the second of the three groups of voice hearer disciples who understood the teaching of the replacement of the three vehicles with the one vehicle through the parable of the three carts in the burning house, related in the simile and parable 3rd chapter of the Lotus Sutra. They express their understanding of this teaching in the belief and understanding 4th chapter of the Sutra by relating the parable of the wealthy man and his poor son. In that chapter, they have, after they have related this parable, Meheke Shayapa says, "We have heard the Buddha's voice teaching, and we dance for joy, having gained what we had never had before. The Buddha declares that the voice hearers will be able to attain Buddhahood. This cluster of unsurpassed jewels has come to us unsought. Now we have become voice hearers in truth, for we will take the voice of the Buddha way and cause it to be heard by all." Now, in previous years, and I don't know when exactly it occurred that I realized that I was mispronouncing these Sanskrit names. I just kind of thought, you know, I'm just lousy at pronouncing Indian names, okay? But then I realized, okay, these had long diacritical marks. I'd never seen that in volume 1. And that set me off on a little bit of an investigative issue to see where these were come. Now, these diacritical marks that I'm referring to are just long vowel. It's that line that you put over a vowel that tells you to pronounce it as a long sound. A is A, and O is O, and E is E, okay? So the bottom line is that I used to say Mahakashayapa. I used to say Sabuti. I used to say Maldgayayana, and I used to say Katyayana. Okay, and then I realized that with these long vowel diacritical marks, where did these come from? I've been mispronouncing these Sanskrit names this whole time. And so I looked, and in volume 2, at the very beginning, because I read everything from cover to cover, it has in the translator's notes that effective with that translation of volume 2 of the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, they were deciding to put in important diacritical marks from the standpoint of a lay person being able to read it and pronounce it correctly and not look foolish if they mispronounced it or confuse somebody by mispronouncing it. So then they decided that as of volume 2, they were going to put in the long vowel diacritical marks for Sanskrit and Japanese. So as soon as I realized here's a whole thing that says basically, yeah, we've made a big change. We're putting in diacritical marks where they should be. And yes, it's for long vowels. So that meant that all of those Sanskrit names that I had been pronouncing using short vowel sounds or trying to use like a Japanese pronunciation weren't really in keeping with the manner in which they were being presented now in all new texts. So anything you go into the dictionary for is going to have the diacritical marks on it now. Okay, anything that's been in NichirenLibrary.org will have all diacritical marks. The only thing that doesn't have diacritical marks is this, the original volume 1, because they decided not to put them in for this particular publication and translation. Okay, so everything now has been updated. I'm sure maybe even the new copies of volume 1 may have the diacritical marks in it before. Anybody is confused by my change of pronunciation of Sanskrit names, it's because of that fact that I now know to look and watch for the diacritical marks that show me long vowels. So I say Meheke, Shayapa, or Kate Yayan, you know, okay, whatever. I just gave you the lowdown on that. All right, so let's go on page 80, chapter 9, prophecies conferred on learners and adepts. 2 important points. We're making good headway on this. Point 1, on the term, and I hope you're all getting something out of it, going back through it again. Point 1, on the terms learners and adepts in the prophecies conferred on learners and adepts chapter. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, so Nichiren says, learners mean those who do not possess wisdom. Adepts mean those who possess wisdom. Now, when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they are bestowing on both learners and adepts a prophecy that, as Shakyamuni Buddha said, all persons will be equal to me without any distinction between us. Chapter 2, expedient means. Are they not? In other words, by chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, everybody's equal. Everybody chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, everybody's equal. Okay? So, again, it's a great teaching of equality, grand teaching of equality. Some belong, continuing on page 80, the second paragraph from the end. Some belong to the adept category in terms of body, but to learner category in terms of the mind, while others belong to the adept category in terms of mind, but to the learner category in terms of body. These, okay, so he's transposing the 2 distinctions of some are of mind and some are of body. He's saying some will be of mind, some will be of body. It doesn't matter. Learners and adepts are all mixed up. Now that we got Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, everything's evened out. Okay? So he says, these learners and adepts are all the living beings in the country of Japan. So he's calling everybody in Japan either somebody of wisdom or without wisdom. Okay? Learners would be those without wisdom, the wisdom of the truth. And adepts would be people that do understand some aspect. The door's been opened, all right? Learners, these are all the living beings in the country of Japan. All of them, wise and foolish alike, and that's the beautiful thing about his teaching. It always includes everybody and everything. There's nothing that's segmented out or segregated from the whole. All of them, wise and foolish alike, we bestow the prophecy of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. We bestow the prophecy that Kosen Rufu will be achieved. And those of you that start to practice and continue in faith will attain Buddhahood in your present form. Okay, so on all of them, wise and foolish alike, because it doesn't matter if you're foolish, if you just chant, we bestow the prophecy of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. We bestow the prophecy. He doesn't say, I bestow the prophecy. He's saying, myself and my followers, those that believe in Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, preaching to them forcefully, though it angers them. Okay, so what does that indicate? That again, that indicates shakabuku. So that means when you hear someone make a mistake out of even just ignorance rather than slander, you should always be prepared to try to help them understand the truth, even if it's just to direct them to a source of understanding, like the NichirenLibrary.org or your senior leader or whatever. But forcefully, though it angers them, pertains to shakabuku, okay? And in other words, we don't wait for somebody to ask to be preached to. We preach without being asked. We already said that in one of the previous chapters. Point 2 from chapter 9, on the passage at the top of page 81. On the passage, at that time the Buddha said to Ananda, in a future existence you will become a Buddha with the name Mountain Sea Wisdom, Unrestricted Power King, thus come one. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says mountain stands for the principle that earthly desires are enlightenment. C stands for the principle that the sufferings of birth and death are nirvana. Wisdom is what is expressed in the words we speak. Okay, so the words we speak here are the principle of sufferings of birth and death or nirvana, and earthly desires or enlightenment. So he's saying unrestricted means without hindrance or obstruction. Power king or penetrating king refers to the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, to the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors, to the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Again, we may say that mountain represents the meaning of the theoretical teaching, and sea represents the meaning of the essential teaching. Wisdom represents the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo, the wonderful law. Now Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are the Buddha, mountain, sea, wisdom, unrestricted power king. We are the that Buddha. He is none other than we, Nichiren and his followers. Outside of us, the votaries of the Lotus Sutra, there is no Ananda. The name Ananda means joy, the joy of awakening to the realization of the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, and latter day of the law, that is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So what he's basically saying, we awaken all the people through all 3 time periods of past, present, and future to the truth of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, so no one is denied it just because they precede us at the point in time that it became available. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So in other words, again, there's no set. So I'm going to start. Okay. Point 2, on the passage, at that time, the Buddha said to Ananda, in the future existence, Ananda, you will become this, thus come one. All right. That's what that basically said. So the record of the orally transmitted teaching says mountain stands for the principle of that earthly desires are enlightenment. C stands for the principle of sufferings of birth and death or nirvana. This is all Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Wisdom is what is expressed in the words we speak, okay? Which when we speak of the unsurpassed way, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, we're speaking as a Buddha would. Unrestricted means without hindrance or obstruction. In other words, we're not afraid to open our mouth and tell the truth. Power king or penetrating king refers to the mutual possession of the 10 worlds. That means our Buddha nature is active and engaged and present. To the 100 worlds, 1,000 factors, to the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. That's all Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's all actually Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in the phenomenal realm. Because when he goes into the 100 worlds and 1,000 factories, he's not talking about human beings. He's talking about aspects of the environment that are also considered living beings. Do you understand? Okay, so again, we may say that mountain represents the meaning of the theoretical teaching, and sea represents the meaning of the essential teaching. Wisdom represents the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo, the wonderful law. Now, Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are the Buddha, mountain, sea, wisdom, unrestricted power king. So we're the Buddha that Ananda is given a prophecy of enlightenment to become, okay? And, pardon me, he is none other than we, Nichiren and his followers. Outside of us, the votaries of the Lotus Sutra, there is no other, an Ananda, okay? The name Ananda means joy, the joy of awakening to the realization of the principle of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Okay, so the teachings of Shakyamuni in the very beginning, as they were heard by Ananda, becomes all of us hearing Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Do you understand? That's what that real point is we are Ananda, thus, therefore, we hear the correct teaching from the appropriate Buddha. Okay, chapter 10, the teacher of the law. Here we go. 16 important points, starting on page 81. My favorite chapter, one of my favorite chapters. Point 1, concerning the teacher of the law. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, Nichiren says, the word law here stands for shoho, the various phenomena of existence. The word teacher, she, indicates that all these various phenomena act directly as our teacher. That is, the varied and numberless phenomena of the 3,000 realms can act directly as our teacher, and we become their disciples. So this is, again, when the reward body becomes active, we actually ascertain much of the Daishonen's teaching and our understanding of Buddhism. We don't even know where it came from. It just suddenly, you know, and you read it one time and you understand what it's saying. Okay, so for those of you that haven't gotten to that point yet, that comes from the repetition of the commitment to study the teaching so that you can be the Buddha in your present form. You have to understand you have a mission to accomplish that. That's not something, oh, if you can make it there, that'd be great. That's not the attitude. The attitude is not begrudging my life. Even if it kills me, I'm going to make it there. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it there. I may not get another chance in another lifetime to make it there. I'm going to make it a permanent part of my karmic reality by making it there in this lifetime, okay? So he says, now Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are the greatest among the teachers of the law. Okay, so we're talking about the teachers of the law, big deal, right? These are all actually Buddhists that are manifesting as bodhisattvas in order to preach correct teaching, right? Now, Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are the greatest among the teachers of the law. So nobody surpasses us, all right? But how does he qualify it? He qualifies it as the disciples of Nichiren. Now, are you truly a disciple of Nichiren if you don't recognize him as being a Buddha? So I would say automatically that eliminates Nichiren Shu. If you're still hung up on things from the Buddhism of the harvest, and you're still looking at an object outside of yourself as the object of devotion, you don't understand shit about what the Daishonin was actually saying. Frankly, I'll be really in your face about that. Okay, so now Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, not Namu-myoho Renge-kyo, are the greatest among the teachers of the law. For when one reaches a realization of the true aspect of all phenomena, Shoho, then one finds that everything from the burning of the fierce fires of hell to the effect of attaining Buddhahood exists in one's life. That wisdom exists in one's life. You don't have to be directed to understand who is the actual original teacher. Okay, that manifests from you just realizing and reading what's being said over and over again. It couldn't be anybody else but Nichiren. All right? Again, now when Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are the greatest among the teachers of the law, for when one realizes a realization of the true aspect of all phenomena, Shoho, then one will find that everything from the burning of the fierce fires of hell to the effect of attaining Buddhahood exists in one's life, and that one is a teacher of the law, as you all are that are listening to me, concerning the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. We are all teachers of the law in the fact that we bring forth the Buddha nature and manifest it as part of our 9 worlds, okay? That's how we validate it. Again, we may say that the law in the title teacher of the law represents the Daimoku. So this is all about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, okay? And the word teacher represents Nichiren and his followers, okay? You're still with me, right? Mm-hmm. Point 2, on the persons who have fulfilled their great vow, okay, such as myself so far. Because they pity living beings, they are born in this evil world so that they may broadly expound this sutra. Now, my motivation wasn't pity for living beings. It was actually my sense of gratitude and debt of gratitude that I shown in my original teacher, my life within my mind. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says the great vow refers to the propagation of the Lotus Sutra. But what is you wouldn't propagate the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law because it's a provisional teaching in the latter day of the law. So when he says Lotus Sutra, no, he's saying Nam-myoho Renge-kyo because of now the age that we're in. Because they pity living beings refers to all the living beings in the country of Japan. The persons who were born into this evil world are Nichiren and his followers. Broadly means to expound the sutra throughout the southern continent of Jampadvipa. This means everywhere. The sutra refers to the Daimoku. Always in this, whenever you read the sutra, it's the latter day of the law. He's talking about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. He's not talking about the 28 chapter text. All right? This sutra refers to the Daimoku. Now, the above passage refers to Nichiren and his followers who chant the Daimoku, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And the above passage is that, point 2, on the persons who have fulfilled their great vow. Because they pity living beings, they are born in this evil world so that they may broadly expound this sutra, doing shakabuku through the process of attaining Buddhahood themselves. Which means they had to practice. They had to have other people support them in that practice. They had to study to be able to understand what the practice was. They had to do many things that preceded this point of them being really the Buddha in their present form. But the entire time they were the Buddha in their present form. They just didn't recognize that because they weren't behaving in that manner because they hadn't come to that full realization yet. But the minute Nam-myoho Renge-kyo came out of their mouth, their Buddha nature was enacted. They had heard the name and the words and the truth. They were on the 6 stages, on to the path of the 6 stages of faith. So he says, again, point 2, on the persons who have fulfilled their great vow, because they pity living beings, they are born in this evil world, so they may broadly expound this sutra. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says this great vow refers to the propagation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Because they pity living beings refers to all the living beings in the country of Japan, in the entire world, actually. The persons who were born in this evil world are Nichiren and those that share his karma to know and be Buddhas in their present form as teachers of the law. They know Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and his followers, the people that are of one mind with Nichiren, of the same mind as Nichiren. Broadly means to expound the sutra throughout the southern continent of Jampadvipa, which is the whole world as far as we're concerned today. This sutra refers to the Daimoku, this sutra, in quotation marks, refers to the Daimoku because every mention of the sutra is the Daimoku in the latter day. Now the above passage refers to Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, who chant the Daimoku, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Point 3 at the bottom, page 82. On the passage, if one of these good men or good women at the time after I have passed into extinction is able to secretly expound the Lotus Sutra to one person, even one phrase of it, then you should know that he or she is an envoy of the Thus Come One. He has been dispatched by the Thus Come One and carries out the Thus Come One's work. He does the Buddha's work. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, which is in the latter day, the practitioner chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as a disciple of Nichiren, okay, acts as the envoy of the Thus Come One, okay? Because before we're at that point in our practice that we've gone to stage 6, we're still functioning as a Buddha, whether we're aware of it or not. That's why stage 4 is the resemblance to enlightenment, okay? Because we're doing all those same things. We are being an envoy of the truth of Nichiren's teaching, okay? The Thus Come One is Shakyamuni, because he will always say that out of respect, and the Thus Come One's work is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. If the work is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, in my mind, the Thus Come One is actually the teacher of the original state of Kuan, which I believe to be someone other than Shakyamuni, although Shakyamuni did encounter Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in order to attain Buddhahood. I agree with that. The Thus Come One also refers to the living beings of the 10 worlds and the 3,000 realms. So all 10 worlds, all 3,000 realms are reflected and respected. Nichiren and his followers, who now chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, are the true envoys of the Buddha, of the Thus Come One. The sutra says that they act as envoys of the Thus Come One. Nichiren is saying we're the only true envoys of the Thus Come One. We are Thus Come Ones. What we convey allows others to be Thus Come Ones, their original state. Okay? Point 4, on the passage Medicine King, page 83, point 4, on the passage Medicine King, you should know that after the Thus Come One has entered extinction, if there are those who can copy, uphold, read, and recite this sutra, offer alms to it and expound it for others, then the thus come one will cover them with his robe. You should know that such persons lodge in the same place as the thus come, and the thus come one pats them on the head with his hand. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, the votaries of the Lotus Sutra, men and women alike, are all thus come ones. So he's saying the votaries of the Lotus Sutra, which are those of us that are chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in the latter day of the law, this all pertains to the latter day of the law, and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the way we're reading this. We're not reading it as though we were reading it in the time of the Lotus Sutra being drafted and being made available to people through Shakyamuni's preaching it, the 28 chapter content over the course of his last 8 years of life. Okay, so it says, the record of the orally transmitted teaching says, the votaries of the Lotus Sutra, men and women alike, are all the thus come ones. So he qualifies right there. You've got to understand that everybody that chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is already a Buddha, regardless of whether they've gone to that sixth stage and realized the fact that they're the Buddha. For example, they exemplify the principle that earthly desires are enlightenment and the sufferings of birth and death are nirvana. Our very practice through our lives and overcoming obstacles and gaining victory and showing actual proof. This is showing the birth and death are nirvana, and the sufferings of birth and death are nirvana, and earthly desires and enlightenment. Now, when Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, are persons who lodge in the same places as thus come one. Therefore, Futashi says in his commentary, morning after morning we rise up with the Buddha, evening after evening we lie down with the Buddha, moment by moment we attain the way, moment by moment we reveal our true identity as thus come ones. I added that part, as thus come ones, because that's what we're moment by moment revealing when we reveal our true identity. Our true identity is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. We are Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come ones. All right, point 5 at the bottom of page 83. Point 5 on the passage, this storehouse of the Lotus Sutra is hidden deep and far away where no person can reach it. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says the words, this storehouse of the Lotus Sutra, refer to the Daimoku. Before it was expressed by Nichiren, it was in the storehouse, so to speak. It was the wisdom of the Buddhas of the 10 directions and 3 existences. All Buddhas attained Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, but it was never made available to common mortals. Okay, so the record, he says again, point 5 on the passage, this storehouse of the Lotus Sutra, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, is hidden deep and far away where no person can reach it. Why is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo the storehouse of the Lotus Sutra? Because the entire content of the Lotus Sutra is contained within Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the Daimoku, right? Okay, so it says, the record of the orally transmitted teaching says, the words, this storehouse of the Lotus Sutra, refer to the Daimoku, as we've already said. The words hidden deep refer to the essential teaching. It's hidden in the depths of the 16th chapter. The words far away refer to the theoretical teaching. No person can reach it applies to those who slander the law. Now, Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are not included among the people who can never reach it. And we will go on to point 6. On the passage, these persons conjured up by magic will listen to the law, believe and accept it, and abide by it without violation. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, the word listen or hear indicates the stage of hearing the name and the words of the truth. The word law refers to the Daimoku. Believe and accept means to accept and uphold the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. To abide by it without violation means to abide by and follow the 2 doctrines, the essential teaching and the theoretical teaching. The passage refers to Nichiren and his followers, the people who now chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So let me read that one more time before we stop. point 6 on the passage, these persons conjured up by magic will listen to the law. We're not conjured up by magic, we're conjured up by pre-existing karma. As votaries, as disciples. We come out of the ninth consciousness and we enter this world to express our Buddhahood. That always precedes that circumstance always precedes people that express Buddhahood in their present form. It's never like, oh, I became a Buddha today. No, you already were one. All right, you may have just come to the realization today. Okay, these persons conjured up by magic will listen to the law, believe and accept it, and abide by it without violation. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says the word listen or hear indicates the stage of hearing the name and the words of the truth, which is to hear of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The word law refers to the daimoku, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Believe and accept means to accept and uphold, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. To abide by it without violation means to abide by and follow the two doctrines, the essential teaching and the theoretical teaching. The passage refers to Nichiren and his followers, the people who now chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Do you understand what that was qualifying? Okay. The reality is that these two doctrines are the predication of these two doctrines, the essential teaching and the theoretical teaching. It's now the latter day of the law. What is Tentai Ichinen Sanzen? It's theoretical Ichinen Sanzen. Okay, so now when we talk about theoretical, we're talking about the entire Lotus Sutra because it's a provisional teaching because we're now in a different age. All right, and the essential teaching he's talking about here and why he mentions it first when the theoretical teaching comes in the beginning and the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra comes in the end, he's saying now the essential teaching and the theoretical teaching in that order. So he's talking about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and that which has preceded it. This passage refers to Nichiren and his followers, the people who now chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and have become enlightened to the truth of the latter day of the law and the original state of Kuan. Thank you. We'll continue on point 7 the next time we get together. Thank you.